Hello.
Hey, hi.
Hi. I had to take my elf ears off and put my my viewer ears on. Welcome to the very first Lorebeards Book Club. A beautiful snow on Vera's background, and I am a festive reindeer. Because this will probably be my last one before Christmas, even though other people will have ones before Christmas.
Yeah, likewise. I see that despite not planning this, we're both very festive.
Yeah,
So
exactly. We are indeed. So, is everyone super hyped for book club? I know Andy and Sotek gave us a bit of a hype beforehand.
I've been pretty excited about this myself. TROLLSLAYER is a great read, and it's quite interesting too, because it's like a timeline at the very early stages of Warhammer, right?
It is.
You can see concepts emerge.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. This is some of my notes in beautiful book form. I've written the page numbers. They're collated into plot, lore, characters, places.
Excellent, and far better organized than I am.
I sort of run out of bookshelf space, so the last two short stories are written out in full, but it's still quite pretty. I do like it, and it's thank you very much for the cool makeup. No problem. I did this on Friday for Lawhammer. I thought I'd do it again for Christmas. Yeah, we are indeed Christmas maxing. Unfortunately, my phone stops recognizing me with the camera when I do this. So, yeah, I'm locked out of my phone. So, today we're talking about TROLLSLAYER, the very first installment in the TROLLSLAYER Gotrek and Felix's journeys. After fleeing the authorities in the imperial city of Altdorf, Felix Jaeger swears a drunken oath to dour dwarf Gotrek Gurnison to record his death saga. And this is the start. It's made up of a number of short stories, and in my version, William King's given an introduction because I think this is published in... When is this published? This edition's published in 2013. The original anthology was published in 1999, but the stories in it were published or had been written long before that.
Yeah, I think the first was 88, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. It's like third edition.
Yeah, exactly. And interestingly, in his introduction, Bill writes, the plot of Geheimersnacht came from a game I ran for friends and family in Edinburgh one summer. It really was that simple. And Geheimersnacht is the very first story that we'll get to in the book. The contents are, the short stories we'll be talking about are Geheimersnacht, Wolf Riders, The Dark Beneath the World, The Mark of Slaanesh, Blood and Darkness, The Mutant Master, and Ulrich's Children. Oh, and our first super chat comes from Andy Law.
Aw.
What was your favorite of the short stories in TROLLSLAYER, Vera? As I fix my I'm gonna have to take these off. They don't compile. Oh no, maybe not. They don't compile well.
My very favorite? I quite liked The Dark Beneath the World. I thought it was very interesting. It was cool to see Gotrek in his ancestral environments, and I think that its take on just dwarven architecture was neat. I think that the way it handled the spirits of the dwarfs is quite neat. I had a good time with that.
Well, so I was maybe going to say the same one. I had a good time with it as well. It was interesting to me because we had encountered Aldred Kepler in Lawhammer in sort of an alternate history where he hadn't died, and so that was interesting to go back and reread the original short story that he was in. I liked Geheimersnacht because it was the first one, and because it was such a trope that will be set forever, especially in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and that is that. I mean, we're going to get onto it because it's the first one, but that they get to a town, a little village, and they're looking for someone, and everyone thinks that the people are missing, but actually shock horror, spoiler alert, they're the bad guys. Like, it's such a classic Warhammer trope that the people you think are the victims turn out to be the cultists.
It's a great twist. It's a great story. Very tight.
Yeah. So I think the first thing I wanted to say is that definitively we can say, as soon as we pick up the book and read in my book page 15, we can definitively say that the book that William King wrote, well, obviously he wrote the whole thing, but the stories that we read aren't Gotrek's and Felix's actual adventures that Felix Jaeger wrote.
Yes. We have snippets from My Travels with Gotrek, which are not quite what we're reading.
Exactly.
It's closer to Word of God.
Exactly. And it is and those snippets are from first person perspective from Felix, and all the way through the short stories. I think we're in third person limited. So usually we're taking Felix's point of view. We hear some of Felix's thoughts. We're privy to some of his feelings. And then as you go through the short stories, some of them we move into third person limited in other people's, either a protagonist or an antagonist, and we get some of their thoughts and feelings as well, which is quite common in Warhammer fantasy novels. To take that approach. What we never do, though, in the first book, and it'll be interesting if we add any more for the next set of Lorebeards, we never get Gotrek's point of view. It's never third person limited from his perspective. We don't know what Gotrex feels. We don't know what he thinks. And I think that's purposeful. He remains kind of a mystery to Felix.
Yeah, and a lot of Felix's perspective is about how it's hard for him to quite understand Gotrek, even though he relates to him and feels like he's becoming more similar to him as the books go on.
Yeah. And we know what Gotrek says he thinks quite often. It's how much he hates elves, how elves are like trees, how he quite likes to cut down trees and cut down elves. There's a few in there that I'm going to call out that I think one of them in particular I didn't really enjoy, but it's a really interesting reference and something we can talk about culturally. One of the weaknesses of the Warhammer dwarf versus elf rivalry, and some of the strengths of it. Some of them are fine. They're just, Gotrek grumping along as he walks through a forest. So from Benjamin Fraser, Dark Beneath the World, a solid story. I'm especially fond of it for being immortalized as the cover of Wifrip First Edition. That is a good bit of lore. I wish I'd brought out Wifrip First Edition. I could have held it up, but
yeah, it's about as iconic as it can get. Like, I've got a soft spot also because I wrote Skarsnik for the fourth edition expansion for Greenskins. So seeing more 8-peaks is great.
Yeah. And next one is, who is your favorite side character from TROLLSLAYER?
Favorite side character? I've got a soft spot for Kat. I'm proud of her.
Yeah, me too. I'm gonna have to pick a different one now. I do like Kat though.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah. I do quite like Justine as the counterpoint to Kat.
Yes. I thought they were written in a quite interesting way.
Yeah.
I think that her ascension, like her turning point on the path to glory, is really well written, and that it's kind of an interesting look at how that operates internally. So
yeah, and I believe Andy said it was kind of verboten to write from Gotrek's perspective. Yes, so I doubt it'll ever happen. Oh, thanks. There we go.
Oh, lovely! There he is.
The world.
Look at that shock of orange.
I know, it's great. I have a rainbow mohawk hat that I almost wore, but I might wear that next time if we do another Gotrek and Felix novel.
Oh, excellent. And you can kind of see from that too, like how the aesthetic has evolved, right? Because this captures a very specific moment in Warhammer's lineage.
Yeah, it does.
like even the descriptions of orcs in the books, they have like piercings and things. They're almost silent entirely. They're these hulking masses of like ringed flesh and muscle, and that aesthetic evolved a little bit over time, right?
Yeah, they've got their red eyes as well that the greenskins have.
Yep.
Yep. Oh, all my books are falling down. So yeah, as we we start off on Geheimersnacht, and we start off on let me just find it. The Standing Stones Inn on the Bogenhafen Road. Now, interestingly, Andy says that they go to Hartsroch in this first story, and originally in an earlier edition it was Blutroch. So when Andy was doing, and actually later on in Warhammer maps, they've had to put Hartsroch and Blutroch in, and both of them have standing stones nearby as a result. The one we go to, yeah, Blutroch, yeah. He's just put it in the chat. I am taking it off because it keeps on falling off. Just Blutroch, have to imagine.
The takeaway is it's dangerous on the Bogenhafen Road.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and through the whole of the book, we follow Gotrek and Felix on quite a grand adventure. I tracked it. So they start off on the Bogenhafen Road. They don't go through Blackfire Pass, which is interesting. They take a secret dwarven route under Blackfire Pass. They end up they're in the Grey Mountains, and then once they get into the Border Princes, they go they pass the Blood River, they go south to the hills of Geistenmund, they travel to the Freistadt of Ackendorf, they go through the Venland Marches, which are quite interesting. I looked these up, and Andy and I had a chat about them. Venland is not a grand province, but a province, much like Nordland is, Ostermark is. So it's one of those provinces, Venland, that could have become a grand province if it had had, lucky politics, but in the end it didn't.
Yeah, they go on quite an adventure. It's sort of wherever Gotrek wants.
Yeah. They go from there, from the borderlands, they go to Karazakarak, the Everpeak, they go past Blood River again, they end up at Karak Eight Peaks. They then start to move back north, they go to Fredericksburg, and they then travel all the way up, and they end up somehow... they go to Kleinsdorf, they go to Flensburg, and somehow they end up in the Reichwald. We're not really sure how they do that. They must miss out Nuln somehow, because they're on the Nuln to Fredericksburg Road near Blutdorf, but then in the next story, they're just magically in the Reichwald, which is much further north. So, I mean, maybe there's two Reichwalds.
Maybe they're very bad at navigating.
It's possible. It's possible. So yeah, Gotrek grumping along to a Christmas jingle.
Oh, that's a thought. You get a whole dwarven hall singing Christmas carols.
Yeah. And I love that the titular Chaos Troll of Trollslayer makes a cameo in the fall of Karak Eight Peak records and Grudge lore. So it implies it's been lurking for like 3,000 years.
It does seem pretty sturdy.
It does. Yeah, so those are all that's the journey that they go on in this book. Each short story is set in a different place as they go on this grand journey. I don't know if anyone's mapped the journey. It feels like somebody should have done or could have done, but I don't know if they have. There's quite a lot of taverns and inns mentioned all the way through, so quite less interesting for wargame players, but interesting for fantasy roleplay players and GMs to pick them up and drop them into your own games.
Yeah, we see a lot of local flavor, like the way that townspeople live, the environment in a sort of domestic setting. They give the number of 700 people in one of the villages. It's not Altdorf, right? It's set in
Yeah,
opposition to Altdorf. In fact, Felix's perspective is sort of academic and scholar is sort of contrast with his surroundings and the simpler lives that he finds.
Mm-hmm. And I think that as I said at the beginning, the first story to me is just like, and when you read that the author had run it as an adventure, it makes sense. You know, they turn up at an inn on the mysterious night, which is Geheimasnacht. I think both of the moons are probably out on that night, the night of mystery. They go to an inn, they're told that some people are missing, and they go off to find them, but sadly, they're actually cultists. And they end up slaying a bunch of cultists.
Yup, and they did encounter quite a few beastmen throughout the entire voyage, right?
Yeah, there's a black coach, a mysterious black coach that goes past them at the start and pops up all the way through. I thought it was interesting in that section that the Slaanesh cultists do actually talk. It's not told, you're not told what language it is, but I took some notes, and you can probably construe that maybe they're speaking in classical with some chaos words added. So I don't think it's dark tongue, essentially, is what I'm saying. Let me find it.
Well, it's different from the Call of Tzeentch later on also, right? They use a similar syllabary, but the language itself is different. So
yeah, I mean, classical is a mix of Latin and Greek, just kind of like polyglotted together. And that's what the stuff they're saying in the first one sounds like. They say something, oh, I'm so annoyed. It's in my languages section. I'll find it in the book. It's like Slaanesh, Amat, Slaanesh something. Oh, here we go. Igrak to Amat Slaanesh. Maybe it is dark tongue. Amat to Amat Slaanesh. Zarkol Tean Amat Slaanesh. I just felt that like to Amat like sounds like a bit Latinish. It sounds like to Amo Amasamat, like the first conjugation you learn. I love, you love, we love. So to me, it's saying Igrak something, we love Slaanesh. Zarkol something, we love Slaanesh.
Yep. And then we get some proper, very close to Latin classical later on, the Malum Sedelet part.
Oh, yeah, we do. And that's in a book that's mentioned a couple of times, actually. That's in the book
Deramundi,
about Souls, Deramundi by Neustadt. Yeah, what did you say? Malum Sedelet.
Which is pretty, that's close to right, isn't it?
It's pretty close. Like, Delet is something destroy, because like it's the famous thing that they say, God, I've just forgotten it. Carthago like must be destroyed. Like a senator stands up in the Roman Senate and says it. Carthago delenda est. Yeah. Right, we've got a super chat. The first several stories had a very Saturday morning cartoon or pulpy radio drama vibes, like how the plot would jump around and skip certain mundane action and leave off on slight cliffhanger.
Yeah, I think Benjamin is right. It has a episodic comic book vibe. They're in a very dramatic situation, and sometimes they hang on it for a while. Like for Wolf Riders, they're spending quite some time setting up and adventuring about, but they skip past, they browse past to get to the real action of things when things get horrible again. So
the very first thing I wrote about it, as I was reading just the first section, someone's mentioned in the chat, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's right down there. No, you can't. Oh yeah, reminiscent of The Witcher. Just reminded me of the anthology of, is it The Last Gift, the Last Wish? What is the anthology? The Last Wish, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Stefan's entirely right.
Yeah, I totally got that vibe as well. And all the way through, it feels like what The Witcher and his companions constantly encounter, which is people who need their help, sometimes want their help, sometimes don't want their help, and are just kind of dicks to them, with the occasional person who appreciates their assistance in slaying whatever issue they've encountered that day.
Yup. Like, it's been a while since I read The Last Wish, but I would say that this style of violence you see in this is also kind of similar to that. There's a lot of flickering blades and impossible movements of Gotrek's axe, and somehow the blade was already there. And
yeah,
it's good fun. It's good fun.
I'm just going to bring up this one. Sorry, I'm just getting used to the Giri Girianson. A little off topic. If there's ever a 40k book club, I recommend Pete Fehervari's Reverie. I feel like you girls could appreciate the strangeness of Angel Resp. We'll bear in mind.
I will take a note on that right here.
Yeah.
Boom. Okay.
Yeah. And Sotek. Oh. Sotek said, I also really love how absolutely terrifying the Goblin Wolf Riders are written, and that of all the horrors Gotrek faces, a damn goblin is what took his eye. Goblins won, dragons greater, demons, etc. 0. Yeah. Totally agree. And as we go through the course of the novel, well, the stories, as you said, Vera, there's loads of things that pop up either for the first time or they're callbacks to the first edition of the role-playing game, because William King was playing it, and those people pop up in other novels. So there's lots of little Easter eggs all the way through that we'll call out as we go through this chat. Did you spot any that were like particular favorites of yours?
These little Easter eggs. I enjoyed him talking about playwrights and things back in Altdorf. That was quite fun. Showing off how well read he is.
Yeah, he mentions at least Detlef Sierk and Taradash. But then in the second story, where Kirsten first makes her appearance, and there's an exiled noble who's been kicked out of their lands in the Empire, looking to reestablish themselves in the Border Princes, which again is like a classic Warhammer trope of a noble who's fallen out with their liege lord to go and do that. One of the characters, one of the Von Deals, is actually a playwright himself as well, and has written a play that Felix has seen. That Felix, I mean, it's the first clue that there's something wrong with him. He's written a play called Strange Flowers, which does have pretty weird vibes anyway.
Yes, this is true. There's this interesting theme there, just to do with how much like the fiction of corruption can lure one into it, and Felix has to grapple with this himself, because he spends quite some time in these books worrying about the fate of his own soul, and like how his experiences have shaped him, and whether he's in danger himself of falling to corruption, because he's been exposed to quite a lot.
Yeah. And that's right, as someone's put in the chat, that's Manfred von Deal, and he's there, I think, is it his uncle Gottfried von Deal that he's following down? In this whole section, they also reference Katerina von Wittgenstein, and reference the von Wittgenstein family as having a dark reputation, which is interesting because the von Wittgensteins are, of course, in The Enemy Within, in Death on the Reich, and do probably deserve the dark reputation that they have as a result of their activities in their castle on the Reich.
Yep.
Yeah, so I quite like that little thing. It suggested that the author, again, had like been playing through The Enemy Within as part of their campaign that they were running when they wrote the first set of short stories.
Yeah, it feels quite coherent. It's good fun.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of like little moments of the setting coming through and deepening how things are out in the smaller towns of the Empire, right?
Yeah, I think also this story, also the second one, sets a pattern for how Felix goes through life, which is rocking up somewhere, meeting a girl, starting to care for the girl, and they're being torn away by circumstance, or by ultimately the fact that his oath to Gotrek. And yeah, Gotrek wasn't ever going to let Felix have a peaceful life, and he's going to follow him around, and he loses a lot of people that way.
Is this a good time to talk about Felix as a character, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely.
So we're introduced to Felix, of course, after he's already made his oath to Gotrek, in happier times, when it seemed like a better idea when he was a little drunk himself. Felix has, of course, been expelled from university. He killed a rival in a duel that was not meant to go quite so wrong. And he is fresh-faced and not experienced with the ways of chaos and the ways of the world outside of Altdorf in general. We learn a little bit about him. He's an agitator who was rallying against, I believe, a window tax, which is quite fun because I believe that did happen in London at some point, roughly around the sort of Warhammer era setting. And of course, he was pulled free from the horses, but he was a proper agitator, like all the way back in '88. So this concept has run through things, and he has quite a lot of interest in the well-being of his fellow man. Of course, he's often dragged into these horrible situations by Gotrek, who he has a respect-hate relationship with for some parts of this. And their relationship, of course, is at the core of this, how Felix navigates his oath to Gotrek and how duty-bound he feels to it, his ability to understand his traveling companion and himself to some extent, the way that he sees himself changing and becoming more martial, what he does and does not have nightmares about, and so on.
Yeah. And in page 77 in my version, Felix explains to Kirsten like what Gotrek is. He's a troll slayer, and is asked like, why do you follow along with him? And he says, well, when he saved my life, I pledged blood loyalty. I didn't understand what that meant, but I do now. And now he does know what it means. He decides to stick to it, which is like surprising, I think, for a human. And I think Gotrek and people that encounter Gotrek and Felix are constantly surprised that Felix does like have it in him to keep on following him around.
Yeah, like it's understandable why Felix has Gotrek's respect, because he does keep his word in pretty arduous circumstances. And he's quite a warrior himself, like as you might surmise from someone who successfully killed a rival in a duel even by mistake. He is a deft hand with a weapon. Once he gets a rune sword, he is quite skilled with it and does his own share of fighting.
He does, yeah. And in one of the stories in here, you know, for plot reasons, Gotrek becomes strangely passive, probably to allow Felix to show how he can cope without him. And he does cope, well, fairly well without him.
More or less, yes. He starts trading on his own reputation a little by the end of that, but he's legitimately quite strong. He's an able-bodied warrior, let's say.
Yeah, no, not insensibly drunk. He literally, I think he gets like knocked on the head, and he literally just stops being like Gotrek. He becomes like, people insult them, people attack them, and he doesn't do anything. And Felix is left to deal with it by himself, which prompts them to Felix to have to seek aid from an alchemist and go up into the mountains to find a flower called, what's it called? Sunblossom. Yeah. It's yellow, which the alchemist claims if mixed with weirdroot will bring Felix right back to the person he was before. But he, in the end, he just gets hit on the head again. So we can just assume he had a mild concussion, and that's what it does to dwarves.
Well, I think one of my favorite moments of Felix's characterization is what he does when that mixture doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
He completely loses his mind, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is fair.
No, definitely. I also if we talked about Felix a little bit. If we talk about Gotrek, like what can you say about Gotrek that isn't just he's a troll slayer? You're a classic grumpy dwarf who's done something in his past, has sworn the Slayer oath, and just like grumps along from place to place, trying to find things to kill, and is constantly and things to kill him, and is constantly disappointed he's not dead yet.
Well, the thing about Gotrek is he hates elves and he hates trees because they remind him of elves.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't mind those bits. I don't mind when he's talking about like, oh, I hate the woods because they remind me of elves, and I hate elves, and I just want to get my axe and cut them all down. And like Felix becomes a bit like, yeah, I kind of agree with you. I really hate these woods. But I don't like that there's at least once in this book, and later on he says something similar where he's like, oh, I don't wear armor like a girly elf. I don't mind that characterization of dwarves hating elves, but I do object to the idea that it's like that kind of stereotypical, you throw like a girl, you do this like a girl. I just think it totally understandable for when these books were written. You would absolutely put that in. But there's an element of, and I love the dwarf elf rivalry. In Wifrip, I love how it came about. I love that it's so tragic that everyone forgets that once they were allies, you know, they fought the same war against chaos. I don't like the way in the real world there can be an element which associates elves with being quite effeminate and dwarves with being quite masculine, and it just becomes a bit like, like let's not go down that route. Yeah, exactly, John. That's exactly it. The dwarves respect and revere their women, and they don't have that kind of misogyny. So why would he say that elves were girly?
To be fair, Gotrek is a little rough around the edges himself. He is a
yeah.
He is kind of in touch with his emotions, though, which is interesting. Like, he's a sentimental guy. Like, we see glimmers of this in a lot of places, but there's one moment where he like looks out at the mountains and like a tear almost rolls down his cheek. He's there's some depth there. Yeah.
So I just think it's slightly out of place. I know it's not the author saying it, it's Gotrek saying it, but I just think it's out of place for how much dwarves revere their women, and I just don't think that dwarves would think of elves as girly. Like, they don't look like human girls, they don't look like dwarven girls, they don't look like halfling girls, they just look like elves. Yeah, it is in Geheimisnacht. It's in the very first story, and I sort of picked it up again, and I'd forgotten about it, and I read it, and I was like, oh, away with the girly elf shit.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, it is interesting because some of the positive stereotypes that dwarves tell about themselves is that they are honorable, they don't lie, they tell the truth. But then this book suggests that that's really not true. That's so weird when you do that, because we can't see the cup. And it just looks
like
water. You're miming something.
You gotta imagine it. It's the realistic appearance of drinking water.
Yeah, it's like really weird.
Well, they run into quite a few different kinds of other dwarves, right? Not always directly in the body of the story, but they've they have a few different dwarven encounters.
Yeah, and the one that caught my eye, and the reason that I bring up the stereotype that maybe people who know the surface of the lore have, is that dwarves don't lie, they're always honest, like they say what they think, is that the priestess of Valea, when they meet her, let me just find the page so I can quote it, but essentially she says, I'm a rememberer, so you know I'm telling the truth. Well, if dwarves always are known for telling the truth, why does she need to say that?
I did like that as like a speech act that cements her as like a holy person who can be trusted. Like, it's like I speak with the voice of a lie. I liked that. I thought it was neat. But
I really liked it. I really liked it, and I really liked that her name, Magda Freyadottir. So even the way like daughter's spell is quite northern, and when you take that, Magda Freyadottir, she's a priestess of Valea. We know that dwarves don't have as many women as they have men, so it might be like 20-1. Someone's just asked in the chat if it's not spelled dottier, so it's spelled dotter, which I think is more Swedish, Dotter. And what I think is interesting about that is that it implies that potentially she's from a different hold, and she's come down to the south to take on that role for that hold. And one of the reasons that I think that's probably the case is that they also describe her as having like a low and pleasant voice, whereas in the start of the book, Gotrek is described by Felix as having, like the mountain dwarfs, of having like guttural, like a rough accent, quite a harsh accent to listen to, especially when he speaks in Kazalid. So I think there's something really interesting there that probably the author didn't intend that, but you can construe from the things that he's dropped about the way Gotrek speaks, the way she speaks, the name that they've given her, that she's probably from a different hold.
Which would make sense given the circumstances as well, yeah. There's an ongoing effort here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other, once you notice that she says, like, you can trust me because I speak the truth, you realize that through the book, dwarves are not painted as that reliable in some circumstances. When they're drunk, when they're telling stories, and some of the stuff that Gotrek has heard about the gold and Felix has heard is from quite unreliable drunk dwarves. So I feel like it exposes this like double nature of dwarves, that they want to be honorable, they want to be to speak bluntly, but they tell tall tales. They're like miners from the mountains. They're men in the bottom of the garden, as Gav Thorpe has said loads of times, telling about how big the fish they caught was.
Yeah, we see Faragrim as well, who behaves somewhat dishonorably, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. So all through the stories, there are dwarves that are like drunkards. They're not sure if they're telling the truth about gold. Like some of them behave quite dishonorably. Yeah, and some of the context is that the dwarves have only been in the Eight Peaks for some 50 years.
Yep.
Yeah. And if dwarves were naturally honest, truthful, honorable, and reliable, they wouldn't need such a culture of oaths and grudges. I agree.
Yeah, we see the gap between what their culture values and
yeah.
what they get out of it all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then from there, I found the description of the above ground hold quite interesting. There was a few things that it tells us about the Warhammer world. It tells us about what you encounter. So things like they have dry stone dikes. Felix looks down at them. Dry stone dikes. I don't know if you're familiar with Vera, but it's something that I'm really familiar with growing up. The farmers in my area, that's how they build their walls. They're dry stone dikes, or dry stain dikes because we're in Scotland. And they are quite low walls that sort of delineate the farmland from each other. It's quite a skill to build them. They need to be maintained, and probably differentiates them from other areas of the empire where you might have more hedges and fences and stuff.
Well, it sounds right that they could keep up with the maintenance at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or at least in the past, right?
Yeah, and when you go into the Karak, they've got cobbled streets, and they've got red slate tiled roofs. And you see that in quite a few of the towns, as well as the hold down in the south where they are.
Yeah, and they see a lot of development that Gotrek feels can no longer be made by the dwarfs, right? It's
yeah, absolutely. Once they go underground, they end up in the square of Mercia, where Queen Hilga's bodyguard took her last stand, and Felix says that the hall is as big as the Königspark in Altdorf, which we can assume is pretty big.
Yeah.
And also, they talk about the hold once they go underground in the darkness beneath the world. The hold is it's lit with glow crystals, some of which have been vandalized. And Gotrek says, sort of offhandedly, like it's a shame they've been vandalized because we've lost the art of making those now.
Yeah, which is interesting because it doesn't seem like a runesmithing technology, right? It seems like its own kind of refined, like almost like a rendering of a crystal into something that can glow. Like made me wonder a little bit. Some separate art that's now lost.
Yeah, yeah. And in this bit, this is where they meet the dwarf ghosts. Interestingly, there's something I wanted to talk about and like get your view on, and that is that when one of the dwarves comes out, I'm just trying to find it's in my lore. There's quite a lot of interesting bits here. Gotrek speaking in what might be Kazalid when he says, well, it must be Uruk Mortari, which I assume means die orcs.
Yeah, the Mortari root for sure. Something to do with, yeah.
Which is interesting because I find that really, if that is Kazalid, that's really interesting because it suggests that shared root of the languages, which we know they have anyway. We also, at the start, we also get a little glimpse into Felix's view, and that is that dwarves get gold fever.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And the other elder races do too. Now, I find that super interesting because who are the other elder races that he's referring to? We know we must be referring to elves, right? We know they're an elder race, but who are the others?
Yeah, like who else could count?
Yeah.
I doubt Felix would consider a halfling an elder race, right?
Yeah, so we know that it's not the Beastmen because later on in the book, Gotrek mentions that although Felix thinks that Beastmen are just human mutants, Gotrek knows that they're actually a species, that they turned up on the world. They could be considered the original children of chaos. They turned up in the time of woe. They probably came through the polar gates or were made after the chaos hordes came through the polar gates.
Yeah, and this is news to him. He laments at that time that the historians of the Empire don't know this already.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, oh, you don't know anything. Elves for sure could be dragons. And this gold fever is more than just like a desire for gold. In the lore, that gold fever is probably Chamon, the gold wind, which runs through those heavy metals and can, like, in those sensitive races. Now, a dwarf might argue that they aren't sensitive to magic like that, but the fact they have gold fever suggests something differently.
Yeah, I think this is a good point that the lizard men do have quite a lot of gold themselves and could quite passionately pursue it if someone were to say, take their gold on some kind of research expedition. They might be pursued by quite a few lizard men. So
Yeah.
I think that would make sense if some part of Felix's academic background he learned about this factoid.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's meant to imply that the elder races are the races that were on the Warhammer world before the old ones came, and before the time of woe. Now, originally that wasn't humans. Now it is, and the lore changes. At one point, that was considered not to be humans, and they came like later, and then it's kind of like retconned so that humans would be around at that time as well. But yeah, I'm thinking elves, dwarves, lizard men, dragons, fishmen, because they are mentioned in a later Gotrek, like just as an offhand. So fishmen are probably an elder race too. Don't know about halflings, ogres, gnomes, probably. Yeah, it's a really interestedly like dropped offhand remark from Felix.
I somehow doubt they meant gnomes necessarily, but perhaps, yeah.
I don't. Yeah, did they mean gnomes here? No. And would Felix know about gnomes? Probably not. But are gnomes an elder race? Yeah, I think they are.
Yeah. I think they'd count.
Yeah, for sure. Here is another super chat. Dwarf insult should be how light and flimsy their armor is, or how untrustworthy their oaths are, or how their architecture is inferior since wood. Yeah, for sure.
I can see that. Yeah, critique of craftsmanship, right?
Yeah,
Of honor.
yeah, like umge just means like shoddily made, so that for sure is an insult they do. Oath breakers, they're always banging on about how elves can't be trusted because they break their word. So yeah, definitely oath breakers. I just think like girly elves wearing armor is just like such an odd dwarf insult to say. I quite like both dwarves and elves disliking wood as architecture for different reasons. Dwarves because it's flimsy, and elves because it's dead and it's disgusting. Like they would like, if they had wood as architecture, it would be living wood, it would be sung, and they go into like human cities and they're like, oh, you make your houses out of the flesh and bones of trees.
They're living in carcasses, right?
Yeah, living in carcasses. Delightful. Yeah. Oh yeah, not being able to grow a beard, that would be another one. Would be quite a good one. Someone's just popped that in. Yeah, exactly. Mornington, like dwarven armor's the best in the world. Look at Ironbreakers. What? Maybe they disdain elf armor, or maybe it's just a Slayer thing. Like maybe we just have to put this down to Gotrek being a bit unusual even for a dwarf.
Yeah, like, and he has a leather jerkin on at some points of this, right? I've seen this cited often in arguments in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay circles about like, oh, but Gotrek had a leather jerkin. Surely soft leather is okay for crit deflection, right? This comes up all the time. This is a cited source that he has something on. So,
oh, this is an interesting question. Are the glowstones old one tech? 8 Peaks is old.
Yeah, like it appears to be a form of technology that is disturbed if it's removed from its little sconce. So
I thought that it might have actually been elf magic. And that it was from a time when elves and dwarves actually traded with each other, because Gotrek talks about how awful it was that the elves and dwarves fell out, that they had no one to trade with anymore. Like Felix is like, hey, but that was great because you guys then ruled all of the empire, you kicked the elves out, and he's like, yeah, but it was shit because there was no one to trade with anymore, and it was a complete, like, it just destroyed us. Not only did the war destroy us because so many people died, but the war destroyed us because it destroyed our way of life. And that way of life was peaceful trade with the elves. So that would be quite interesting if the glowstones were, and he's like, it's a lost art to us, because it was never yours in the first place, or, you know, it was supported, you provided the stones, the elves provided the magic to empower them.
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah. And of course, like, if the elves know it, then it doesn't rule out it being originally Old One technology and something that the elves were taught by the Old Ones.
Because I think the elves have preserved probably the most of, like, the teachings of the Old Ones out of all the different races of the Warhammer world. They seem the closest to that knowledge, other than the Lizardmen themselves, in a very different way.
Vala Azriel Ungol is the crash site of a silver ship confirmed. I like this one. Beardless Oathbreakers, Tongues of Silver.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. 8 Peaks is old, and I really like it when they approach 8 Peaks and Gotrek like lists. I think it's Gotrek lists what the 8 Peaks are called. It's just like a really nice moment when he lists the names of the mountains. I also thought, don't know about you, Vera, but that point, he lists the names of the mountains. He talks, he says, like, long have I wished to gaze upon, like, it just sounds like it's like straight from Lord of the Rings. Like, just like a lift and shift.
Yeah, it's nice when he gets a little emotional. You see these glimmers of him being quite a thoughtful person. Sometimes very suddenly, a lot of the time, he'll have this this moment of reverie almost, where he seems like a different person, almost someone who is before this Slayer oath, perhaps a thoughtful and considerate guy, and then boy has he changed.
Yeah. So here is a question. Chaos Taint magical corruption seems similar to how the Seven Rings worked in Tolkien's Legendarium. The corruption was there, but it just made them more greedy and cruel, not subservient to dark powers. I think the difference between Chaos Taint magical corruption and Tolkien's Legendarium is that Chaos Taint can mutate you. Even
Yes.
if you have the purest of hearts and the purest of intents, simply being around like Warpstone, being around dark magic can corrupt your physical body. And then as mutants are hated, outcast, the physical corruption is seen as a reflection of spiritual corruption. You're then in a really difficult situation with the society in which you live if you live in the Empire.
Yeah, like the fact this could be thrust upon you is definitely one element. Like later on, Felix is threatened with this, right? They're going to be forcibly mutated by his old classmate.
Yeah, and absolutely. There's also the reverse of this, in which people are tempted and become mutated and corrupted because of the things that they do, the lust for power, and just lust for flesh in one of the stories in here, lust for revenge in the one with Justine and Kat in it. So yeah, it's characterized all the way through, and we visit different. We get Zinch, lust for knowledge, lust for power. Like there's so many different lusts for things in the Warhammer world that can cause you to become spiritually corrupted and then physically corrupted. But as I say, the differentiator is you can just be corrupted physically, and it's just sheer bad luck. Like it is though. Like it's a horrible world. Like you can be born a mutant, and your parents will just like chuck you in the forest.
Through no fault of your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and Gotrek thinks they should do more than that. Like he calls it soft that they're not immediately just killing these children, right?
Yeah, exactly. Gotrek's like, well, why would you put them in the forest? Like, what's the point? And I see that point of view in Warhammer. In Warhammer, I see that point of view that if they're what's going to happen to them? They'll be adopted by the children of the forest, and then they'll come back and hunt you down at a later date.
And they do.
Yeah, and they do. Like it literally happens, and quite often they do it because they're so angry because they've been abandoned. Yeah, it's not a great system. Not a great world to live in.
So despite being a little bit of a curmudgeon and swearing and being unkind to quite a few people, Gotrek is a principled fellow, ultimately, despite his temptations.
Yeah. Warhammer world is a cruel world. Then there's parts of the Warhammer world, like in Kislev, it's enough to be born a male with magic attunement because they believe that men can't be trusted with magical power.
Yep. Similar case out there at Nagaroth, right?
Yeah.
For very different reasons, but...
Yeah, Nagaroth is interesting, though, because it's like a particular kind of magical ability. Because on the one hand, pretty much every elf can do, like, petty magic, can do cantrips. So it can't just be male elf. It's male elves that are, like, a specific kind of choose to go down a specific route and choose to be a specific kind of magic user.
Yeah, it's that sorceress aptitude that comes from beyond, like, some connection to the divine. Because a lot of elven magic, I would track back to that... personal connection to some part of the pantheon, what that means to them and how that evolves, and it's separate from that. It's its own tier of study and perhaps a natural affinity for the winds. So yeah. Not that that's Gotrek's concern.
And magic is feminine coded in Warhammer, contends up to and including magical trolls being river hags. Isn't. I mean, there's in TROLLSLAYER alone, there's plenty of sorcerers, there are plenty of chaos sorcerers. The one who's probably the most pure, though, is a woman, and that is in the second story when we encounter Kirsten, and she is in the service of the lady from Middenheim. Well, we don't know that she's from Middenheim, but she's certainly trained in Middenheim.
Right, right.
Frau Winter.
Mm-hmm.
Is that her name?
Who is very effective. She is a battle wizard, pretty much.
She is extremely effective, and it's good to see that. So at the time, Middenheim would have had a guild. It would have been in first edition.
Oh. We've lost Lindsay. Oh no. But she's right. This was like very early on in the evolution of how magic is handled in Warhammer. Hi.
That was weird.
You cut off at first edition.
Yeah,
I think it's right for the timeline.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a guild of wizards in Middenheim. They've got blues and they've got golds. But in first edition, there wasn't the colleges, the guilds. There was elemental magic, and it's great because she does fit into that. So she's doing her lightning bolts. But she also then, therefore, could be a blue wizard who was trained in Middenheim. So it all fits like nicely in with a little bow to fit in with the guild as it's later presented as having celestial wizards in it. And also of the blue wizards, the celestials in Middenheim being elemental wizards who use electricity rather than being the foresight wizards of the Altdorf Celestial College.
I'll note that we do see different handling of magic in a few places also. Like when they get to Fredericksburg, I think that Felix sees like conjurers playing little smoke dragon tricks to tell stories in the streets, and I'm not sure that would fly later in this setting.
No, probably not.
I don't think that would have been okay at 10 years on.
No, no. It wouldn't have been. And especially once once the concept of the articles of magic and being licensed and only using magic for like purposes of war or in the defense of the empire.
Yep. This is pre-articles, and then the way Warpstone is discussed also perhaps has seen some change over the years. There's an impassioned argument made that all the cool kids are doing it, which I think holds progressively less water as the settings understanding of how corruption works is codified.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and also like it being a desirable thing to use it to become mutate, like to see what kind of mutation you get, to develop yourself, to improve yourself. But yeah. I think that there's also a few interesting points in The Darkness Beneath the World where it's confirmed that goblins use wall drumming to communicate with each other underground.
Yeah, I highlighted that, yes. I thought that was great. Yeah.
And then straight after that, so that's on like page, it's just before that. So that's 134. And then on page 131 in my edition, they've been given a map, but the map is hard. Felix can't read the map. And Gotrek's like, well, obviously, because it's in the rune code of the Engineers Guild.
Yeah, and he notably can, which is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is interesting.
Because even among dwarves, engineering is sort of a specialized field.
Yeah. They also, Felix also talks about, when we're talking about language, about the language of the mountain dwarfs being, and that's Kazalid. So I thought that was quite interesting because it implies then that the Imperial dwarfs have either a different language, it's either, a mix of Kazalid and Reichspiel, or they speak Reichspiel, and potentially the Norse dwarfs have their own language, but that Kazalid is a dialect of dwarven languages.
Which would make a lot of sense because in some cases you've got these holds that have stayed isolated for a very long time, and you'd see some conlang evolution outside of that more likely, so yeah, I can see it.
What I think's interesting about the dwarven language is that it can be used for runes, so it can be used to channel magical energy somehow in those runes, but it's never, is it really, I don't think it's ever talked about as being like related to Anaquayan and the first language in the way that Elven is. So I find that a curious fact about the Dwarven runes.
Yeah, because like the rune is almost like a purity of meaning kind of magic, right?
Yeah.
Which is very much what Enochian is about. It's
Yeah,
that like
exactly.
expression of speech or meaning into existence. It creates by expressing, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if the reason that the dwarves don't acknowledge this so much is because those are studies that they were prompted to by their elven allies in the distant past. Like, oh, that's interesting. Perhaps this is from our shared language root, and they've maybe decided to forget that in the years past.
Well, it also like begs a question, which is that is it the sound that's important to the dwarves or the shape? So is that why it's different? Because the sound, you know, it's Anaquayan, it's Eltharine, it comes down to the lingua prestantia. It's using the sounds of your mouth to shape the world, whereas runes are using a visual image. So is there something like fundamental there? And maybe the Dwarven runes, maybe their ancestor language is something more related to the Lizardman like glyphs, or a glyph related language, and it's less important because dwarves don't speak magic. The sound and what word they attach to the rune is less important than the shape of the rune.
Oh, that's so interesting. The idea that it's about like
Yeah.
permanence of form, and the way
Exactly.
that written language has evolved is totally different characteristically. Like the Eltharin runes we've seen are sweeping and quite delicate, especially for like the deities, right? And then for the dwarves, they have these bold, strong shapes that have to be just so. There's a rigidity to them and a permanence to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you look at some of the symbols, like for mountain, they are literally, it looks like a mountain. They're definitely like a hieroglyphic type language. What's the word for that kind of language?
Pictorial, pictographic.
Pictorial, thank you, pictographic. Yeah. Okay, so Grim Isaac asks, should the Slayer series be updated to modern Warhammer fantasy?
I'm not sure how I feel about the idea of like updating the text to represent modern shifts in like aesthetic. I quite like this range of greenskins that are like pierced all over and growling and hissing. It's a different feeling, right? But I think it's something that could deepen the setting as well to have a broader aesthetic range that pulls from these really old entries.
Yeah, I don't think I would update it for two reasons. One, it's not an omniscient narrator. So even though we're not reading Felix's account of his journey, so we're not like in the world and it's a completely unreliable narrator, I think as they stand, there's enough in them that are just, you can just take it as a story. Some of it has been updated. Andy and I were talking about that, and he has put it in the chat. So multiple books have been re-edited to fix certain things that were completely like out of kilter or completely wrong geographically.
You mentioned Bloodrock earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the two places being updated. Yeah. But I don't think you would need to... I think reading through it, it didn't jump out at me as like, oh my god, this isn't the Warhammer that I know.
The one thing that did for me is the street magic in Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
That was but I don't think I would cut the line for that reason.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine.
Yeah,
maybe
and
they're
you know
weird
what?
in Fredericksburg.
Yeah, and a few other bits jumped out at me, but I think again, it's just author style and decisions, and that is how much they use the words for the ruinous powers, how much Felix is just like, oh yeah, we encountered some worshippers of corn, rather than being like the blood god, or using more. They do use a few euphemisms, but they're pretty like chill about like just using and knowing those names for those gods. Whereas the way Warhammer's written, especially fantasy roleplay later is that the vast majority of people don't know any of that. They know there are ruinous powers. They know you should worship Sigmar and other gods and stay away from them, but they wouldn't just be casually being like, hey, yeah, we met some cultists of corn in the woods.
Yes, like what is forbidden knowledge, what is accessible knowledge was codified a lot as time went on. I would think that like the RPG had to do with that somewhat, like the literal forbidden lore skills and so on, solidifying like, hey, the idea of these things are not only forbidden, but they're also rare and difficult to discover.
Yeah, it's why it's the one bit for me about the old world new game that really jars for me, because that's kind of characterized as, oh, this is hundreds of years ago and it's before Magnus the Pious and people don't really know like bad stuff's happening in the world. And I'm like, it's 200 years ago. It's like a fraction of an elf's lifetime. Like the Empire's been around for 2,500 years, or it's like 300 years ago. It's not actually that long in Warhammer terms. The idea that like everything's been forgotten just seems like complete. I'm like, I think you've misunderstood the scale of time that the Warhammer world acts on if you think that 300 years ago would be a long time in that world.
Well, part of the idea there is that it's been a period of like relative inactivity for a lot of the cults, and that the sort of problems that people have dealt with for generations, or at least in the human side of things, have been separate from that. So there is sort of a willful move away from the horrible stories of ominous things, and activity that might otherwise be attributed to cults and daemons and such is not, just because it's not happened for such a long time.
Yeah, like I just feel like it goes a little bit, I know we're not here to talk about the old world, it goes a little bit against the idea that Magnus was the great modernizer, like, because the Empire was kind of like falling apart. And there's just something about it that I think it was a design intent to make the old world role-playing game different from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, because it's not your 5 minutes to midnight, it's in a time of relative peace from chaos where you're actually like, things are far more mysterious. I just feel like maybe it should have been set 1,000 years ago, before more time maybe. I think for me that a much bigger time gap would have made more sense and still done the same thing.
I get what you're saying. I think that makes sense for like the global setting, but I think that for the concerns of the role-playing game itself, like the old world RPG, it kind of works to have it rely on like human forgetfulness in those generations because of how it's grounded like in Talagad, how it's regional to a human settlement that is not the largest necessarily.
Quite a safe place,
yeah, it's like ensconced in the middle of the Empire, like it's relying on their record keeping primarily. There aren't a lot of elves around, so from that perspective, it makes sense to ground it in that experience. But this is quite true. The wise know better, right?
I've gone so off topic. Okay, what else was I looking at here? Yeah, so the language is in that one, in The Dark Beneath the World, there's also another name that I thought was interesting to call out. And that is because it's such a lot of the names that they use in Warhammer are Germanic, and you get the occasional foray into names that seem European but are actually like originally Hebrew or maybe like Greek. But one in this one is really interesting, is Raphael, who is a Templar of the Order of the Fiery Heart that Aldred Kepler refers to. And I just thought it was really interesting because it's such a angelic name and a really interesting choice to pick that name for someone from the Templar of the Fiery Heart of the Order.
Yeah, I liked it as a name there because it made him feel a little bit distant, a little bit the stuff of legends, right?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, and so, sorry, you want to go?
I don't think it was out of place necessarily, though. No. Like, we've got these Estalian characters and whatnot, and that having the name origin from this school of like almost biblical names in the real world.
I didn't think it was necessarily out of place. It just suggested that there's a classical, like roots of classical names, Tilia, Estalia, and then like even before that have more in common with those kind of classical roots in our world, and that potentially, much like some of the higher ranking Sigmarites take on new names, that maybe that wasn't his birth name. Maybe Raphael was a name that he had taken, or maybe he wasn't Imperial and he had come from like Tilia, Bretonia, and then, you know, turned it from an F into a PH to sound more like fancy.
Yeah, I took it for a foreign name, perhaps, but
yeah.
Because, like, for me, a Sigmarite taking on the name of maybe like a classical pulp could happen.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in the same section, there's some interesting. Well, I thought that the reference, because Felix is quite learned, so Felix is a scholar, so he does drop in these occasional references to scholars and like Ibsen's War of the Ancients, or as you mentioned earlier, the classical Dure Mundi book that's by Neustadt. And I really like those droppings. Like Felix tries to make sense of the world through his own education.
Yes, he's doing his best.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's mentioned, they talk about him. Someone says he speaks in High Reichspiel, which I couldn't decide whether it was just because also other places in the books, Felix is referred to as having like essentially a posh accent, a genteel accent. Yeah. He's like well spoken, an educated man. People react.
He's Herr Cleverquagsjäger.
Yeah. People react to him like that. Of us being a highborn. And I wasn't really sure whether High Reichspiel was indicating that he's speaking like a subtly different dialect, a more archaic form, or whether it's literally just that way that person, or they're in the Border Princes at that point, I think. So is there just a slightly different way of speaking down in the Border Princes and their version of Reichspiel, which has been influenced by other cultures, compared to someone who speaks like proper Reichspiel from Altdorf?
Yeah, like I figured it was partly a matter of enunciation and so on, like just the way he speaks and is eloquent. I think the vocabulary choice could be part of it, but I do imagine there's a strong Altdorf accent somehow, just because of my own experience growing up in like big urban areas. You can kind of hear somebody like spend a lot of time in the city. Like there's certain like turns of phrase. We didn't see a lot of like slang in too many places, but that can also carry this.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe like the difference between speaking in, if you went back to, you know, the Britain of the 19th century, the difference between like the aristocrats who could go all over the country and they'd still speak the King's English or the Queen's English, and the local dialect, which quite often, you know, is almost a separate language. You almost have to learn, if you're someone coming into the service, the household service of aristocrats, the language you'll be speaking with them and to them is different to the language that you would be speaking at home, even though technically you'd both still be speaking English. You know, maybe it's the same thing.
Yeah, and like I think that Benjamin's right, that there's that sort of newsroom universal thing for an American equivalent, the broadcast English.
Yeah, I think it's more than accent, though. I think it's probably dialect.
Yeah, because this was designed, right? This was intentional, whereas we're talking more about like what emerged among different social classes in some cases. But it's the same idea where there's like some
exactly.
particular universally recognizable form that then
Yeah. And the dialectical variations just have so many different words. And it's quite clear to this person that Felix doesn't speak that he speaks High Reichspiel. He's like speaks proper Reichspiel.
He sounds like the tax man. No one likes that.
So can we talk about, we're in the darkness beneath the world, can we talk about the ghosts? So
yeah.
There's a dwarf in Darkness Beneath the World who they claim comes back out and his hair is white. And it goes white like immediately. So how? Dwarves don't tend to mutate so So what is our lore-based explanation for the white-haired dwarf?
Could be just shock and horror. You know, there's that. That's what
Yeah.
happened to me today.
Yeah. See, I thought that was interesting because there was a set of books I used to read when I was a kid. They were like Shally school books, and in that happens, right? Someone goes into a cave and they have a terrible encounter with Nazis, and they come out and their hair is pure white, which obviously we know like can't happen. If I was to explain it, I think it must have been the ghosts. Like, it's just the ghosts. He goes down there, and we know that ghosts can probably like suck the life energy out of you. And that poor dwarf goes down there. People don't necessarily believe him that he's seen ghosts, but he comes out and his hair is pure white because he's got a bit of shyish in him, and a bunch of the life in him has just been sucked out of him.
Yeah, like the terror of the moment, that brush with the other side, some kind of enervation could have taken place.
Enervation,
like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just as that ghost goes through you, you can imagine like being enervated completely.
I like the idea that it's this
like curse of years, essentially.
Yeah, like some aspect of youth has been permanently robbed because of this encounter, you know? And it works from the emotional angle, it works from the conceptual angle, and it's evocative, right? It's sort of it's symbolic of this encounter, which is nice.
Yeah, for sure.
Use this trope; it's fun.
Yeah.
Hair going white from shock.
Yeah, and then at the same time, when they do eventually meet the ghosts, it's 170. I'm going to look it up to see who actually says it, to see if they're saying it sort of figuratively. 170. He says, or maybe I did it wrong. I'm going to be annoyed if my ghosts. For a second, it seemed he was lost in the endless immensity of the old world, that he had no point of reference in time or space, that he and the Slayer were alone in a dead world, ghosts drifting in eternity, bound by a chain of circumstance forged in hell with a capital H. So where did Felix think is hell?
Hell is where the chaos comes from. My impression of when they talk about hell and hellish things is that that's being used sort of interchangeably with the realm of chaos here.
Do you see? I felt that it was used interchangeably because it's mentioned a few times as the realm of Moor.
Well, the realm of Moor they referred to as like a peaceful repose at one point. Like I thought that was just
sorry, not the realm of Moor. Where you go after you die, but not necessarily the chaos realms.
But the powers of hell are invoked at one point as a thing that could bring about the wrath of chaos. So chaos originates from there, isn't it?
Yeah, and then again later, when we follow Justine on her, which we haven't talked about at all, on her adventures through the old world, she talks about the gardeners of Paravon and their hellflowers that they look after, and then she slays Leander Kajan, known as Hellblade, the leader of the Company of Nine, at Hellmouth. So there's a lot of hells. There's both like Hellmouth, there's physical hells, there's Hellblades, there's Hellflowers, and yeah, probably, Cain has hells.
There's a few hells, aren't there?
Yeah, there's lots of hells.
There are many bad places to go.
Yeah.
Arguably,
Erith
Mariah's
Kayal
hell, the Black Pit.
Erith Kayal has hells.
Yes.
That's where
Mariah.
Yeah. The Mirai, yeah, exactly. There's plenty of hells, and you probably could do a whole stream on the hell prefix and empire names.
What does it mean in Helmgart?
I think that's Helm, right? That's like...
Very possibly.
Yeah, pretty sure that blades of bloodletters are called Hellblades. Maybe that's what she stole then. Oh no, Leander, that was his name, Hellblade. And then Justine's, oh no, it wasn't his name. It was the Hellblade that he wielded, and she stole it from him. Because then at the end of that story, Kat, the little girl, kills Justine with the Hellblade, fulfilling the prophecy that the Demon Prince had claimed, which was that she wouldn't be killed by a warrior or something.
Yeah, I don't think Kat's gonna be okay though. That's rough.
Yeah, right.
I feel like slaying your own mother with a blade of chaos as a child is not a good pathway to a happy and wholesome life in the Warhammer world.
I agree, and like she wants to go with them, doesn't she? She wants to go with Felix, but even though it may not be a good future for her, the ending of that story, like, it's just kind of sweet because she gets to live with her Mesner, who she says is a nice man, and then right at the end, at the top of the slope, Felix turned and looked back. Below them, Mesner and Kat were two small figures waving. It's quite sweet, right?
It's one of the happiest endings anyone gets in one of these stories.
Yeah, it is a happy ending, and he gives no indication that there's anything in front of her apart from a nice adoptive life with the nice man, her Mesner.
I hope they do great.
And we're just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think it after, like, oh no, that's a bad thing to have handled, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it might be the happiest ending in all of these books.
Which is quite upsetting because everyone else dies.
Yeah, if we look at the ending of the next one, first, let's torch the castle, Felix said grimly. He stalked off to turn the accursed place into a giant funeral pyre. Nice.
Yeah, a lot of bad things happen to kids in these books.
Yeah.
There's some horrible passage where this 5-year-old gets skewered. It's like,
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the one from Kat's perspective, isn't it? Where you just get a litany of the whole town being murdered, including a whole bunch of kids. Yeah,
horrible stuff.
Pretty gross. Yeah. So yeah, what ones haven't we talked about? So we've talked a bit about Geheimnisnacht, Wolf Riders, The Dark Beneath the World, The Mark of Slaanesh.
The Mark of Slaanesh is interesting. I liked what was left unsaid there. It was left unseen. The reaction when our central cultist drops Trow and has some horrible mutation that he's not aware of through the end of the story. He's in denial of its existence. That was great. Just the addled state that he's in. Because after he does his final Warpstone laced Weirdroot dose, he is clearly, something happens to him. He is in a really altered state for the rest of it. And I think that he's properly mutated in some way he's not quite aware of.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
That was a fun read. What a disgusting creature, though. He's terrible.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't very pleasant.
We talked about that a little bit, though, because
we did talk about that one a little bit, because Gotrek was strangely passive and had to be fixed up. We've talked about the cat one quite a bit. We haven't talked about, and we've talked about Justine. We haven't talked about all the places she goes and all of the, which are just like a list of people of the different gods. Although I know, do you know what doesn't make an appearance hardly at all in this book?
What's that?
Nurgle.
That's true. We see a lot of Slaanesh. We see a lot of Khorne. We see some Tzeentch from the former classmate from Albrecht.
Yeah.
Nurgle doesn't really show up much at all.
Even when Justine goes on her slaying quest to gain the favor of Red Kazakh Katal, the chosen of Khorne, she kills Helmar Ironfist, who's a bullhorn champion of Khorne. She kills Marlene Marassa, a flame-hearted priestess of Tzeentch. She kills Zachariah Kaen, a grossly obese champion of Slaanesh. She turns up at Carrag Doom, the lost citadel of the dwarves, up north somewhere. She gets her steed Shadow from a guy called Sethram Schreiber. His affiliation is unknown. And then she gets her Hellblade from Leander Kajan, the leader of the Company of Nine at Hellmouth, which doesn't sound at all Nurgle coded. It sounds very Khorne coded. Yeah,
that's a usurpation from within her own cult.
Yeah, and there's just not really any Nurgle at all. We then we meet a bunch of Tzeentch lots. In Ulrich's Children, there's a whole, he talks about the litany of Tzeentch, Arakai, Nidlek, Zaring, Tzeentch. They talk about Dieng Chin, who's like a known Tzeentch worshipper from other books. But yeah, where's Nurgle? Or is Nurgle the cold we caught along the way?
Nurgle's every gross alleyway they lie in at some point.
Yeah.
Every time someone vomits, Nurgle is there.
I hate Nurgle too. I'm glad he's not in there.
Oh, I quite like Nurgle.
No.
He's so jolly and festive.
No. I hate him. I just hate him. I hate everything about Nurgle. I hate his heart. I hate his minis. I hate his whole concept. I hate the fact he has a goddess trapped in his cauldron. No. No, Nurgle.
Are you fond of the Great Queen one then?
Oh. Yeah, Dian Ching is mentioned in Trollslayer. Dian Ching is mentioned on page 188. I will go and find it.
Yes, a scholar.
A scholar? Yeah. It's Wolfgang Lammel, who we were just talking about, who's in the Sleeping Dragon Inn. With a nostalgic sigh, he closed the old pillow book from Cathay, which had been his first purchase in that strange bookshop in Nuln. So he pops to a strange bookshop in Nuln called Van Nieck's Exotic Books and Collectibles Emporium. And he thinks about a garment that he receives from the fascinating traveler Dian Ching. Sorry if I've pronounced that wrong. There's an apostrophe there that I've maybe not given the correct apostrophe-ness to. A guest of the Countess de Manuel's and another patron of Van Nieck's Exotic Books and Collectibles Emporium. The Celestial, as he styled himself, had proven to be knowledgeable in many esoteric philosophies and the hidden mysteries of many secret cults. In spite his lack of interest in the finer points of the worship of Slaanesh, he had been a most stimulating companion.
I quite liked that line. It's a little salacious, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He also, in the same section, he also thinks to himself, but where was one to acquire a Lustrian devil python in Fredericksburg at this time of year?
Which is outrageous. Like, come on.
Yeah. And he also, I think it's this bit too, yeah, in the next section, when he's still thinking back to his great time in Nuln, he talks about the murder houses of the Commerceplatz and the night circus, where mutant prostitutes serve as depraved noblemen. I don't know if the night circus pops up again. Does it pop up later in one of the future Slayer books? I'm not sure.
I couldn't say. When I hear like mutant circuses and carnivals, there I think Nurgle, right? We get that later.
I feel like the night circus turns up in the one that's set in Nuln. Is it? I'm not. Is it Skaven Slayer? I don't know. Forges of Nuln. It's in Wifrip 2nd edition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does turn up. Yeah, Nuln. The characterization of Nuln is interesting because Nuln is often portrayed to be like a very licentious city of sin.
Gunpowder and sin, yeah.
Yeah.
Heck of a place.
Yeah, yeah.
It's perhaps the smelliest city in the Empire.
The party town of Nuln. So yeah, that is just having a look to see if there's anything else I wanted to mention about the we've talked about. Oh yeah, Litzenbach is also mentioned in the same story. Litzenreich, yeah, Litzenreich is mentioned when Cryptman and Felix are chatting, and he says, "My old tutor at Middenheim University, the great Litzenreich himself, used to say." And Felix says, "I heard Litzenreich was thrown out of the university." So Litzenreich is from the Conrad novels. So another guest appearance. Yeah,
that's good fun.
Oh, interesting. Necroplayer 97. This book has some pacing issues due to its nature as a collection of shorts, but my biggest problem with its pacing is that Blood and Darkness needed to be the final chapter, in my opinion. What do you think?
I think that Blood and Darkness is the strongest ending. I think that it could have been organized that way and hit a little harder. It feels underwhelming to have Felix and Albrecht going back and forth and bickering like school children immediately after all of that, seeing this path to glory get walked. So I can see that. I assume this is organized in order of publication, though. So the cutoff may be somewhat arbitrary due to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also organized, like I said, in that big loop tour. It's almost geographically organized. So that one is there because that's when they got there. And then the next set of stories are coming back up, which you might be right. That might be how William King had written them in that order. Yep. But I kind of agree that it would have been good for that one to be the final one. So for this first book to have been like the consolidation of the legends of Gotrek and Felix, the start of it, and at the end of the the first one, Felix gets his sword that becomes his companion along with Gotrek for the rest of the books. But to do that, they would have had to rewrite them because in a number of the stories that were presumably therefore written afterwards, they mention the sword.
Yep. They'd have had to have. It would have had to have been written differently. It was written as a series of shorts, and I think that narrative structure-wise, doing that as their last in the novel conceptually would have been strong because it is a very strong ending. It's a little anticlimactic to get into the silliness that happens right after, but it is what it is.
I've also got a few interesting tidbits of lore. Dwarves cultivated mushrooms. That's how they one of the foods that they eat when they live underground.
Yeah, that was quite fun. I liked the mutant moths also, just the giant swarm of them. That was cute.
Yeah, and the bat-winged creatures with the faces of beautiful children. Ew.
Were those harpies, do you think, or furies,
rather? Thirst for blood? I don't know. Well, they had to...
What were those? Because there was a Teen of Chaos down there. They could have been like minor daemons of some kind, but I feel like they would have reacted differently. It seemed like an almost normal thing. Like,
yeah, I think they were just mutated bats with it. Yeah, something vampiric. Bat wings, beautiful faces, thirst for blood. Yeah, some kind of dark magic. Maybe they were just like protecting a nearby necromancer, and they were just off the edge, just seeing them off and making sure Gotrek and Felix didn't go down the other route to the dark the necromancer's tower.
There was an entirely different story happening down there, which is plausible given the locale, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, also, we were talking before about the afterlives. Gotrek does refer to the iron halls of my father as the dwarven afterlife.
Yeah, and it's interesting how that was interrupted, right? That the spirits were pulled free from it.
But like the iron halls, why the iron halls? Why not the stone halls? Like I didn't. Just something that sounded nice.
They're forged, maybe, I don't know. There's a more intent behind that. Stone cut, iron forged.
I'm gonna check it, page 29, to make sure that really is. Yeah, this is too good an opportunity to miss. Tonight I will atone my sins and stand among the iron halls of my fathers, not his father. He's got, I presume he means his forefathers, not that he has more than one father. Great Grunjni willing. Gotrek also talks about the old powers when he talks about chaos gods, the ruinous powers. Yeah, or he had two dads. Do you know? And it's entirely possible. Like, there's not many women in dwarven culture, so presumably dwarves are raised by multiple guys.
Oftentimes, I would imagine, yeah.
They're just one big polycule. Forefathers, yeah. Haha. Exactly. It takes a hold to raise a dwarf. I also noted there was an elk on Mount Blackfire, so there are elks in Warhammer. Confirmed.
So, what do you think of the style?
It was fine. It just, to me, just read like classic, like easy to read fantasy, just like not really very challenging. You know, used a lot of tropes and ways of talking about the Warhammer world that were very familiar from other Warhammer novels I've read. You know, it's quite an early one, so in some ways, like it's a trailblazer. It sets the style for those future. I mean, it's not that early though, because they're short stories. I guess there's novels that have already set that style. So yeah, how about you?
I thought it was great. It's like properly pulpy. It was
Exactly.
a fun read. I like the way that violence is handled in them. I thought it was an enjoyable series of cute little vignettes. I like the way that it's presented. I think that the snippets from my adventures with Gotrek are quite nice for grounding in the setting. I like the way that Felix's interiority and his grappling is brought forward. It's cute. It's cute.
Yeah, I think it's completely unchallenging. It's like a comfortable, not cozy, that's maybe the wrong word with all the killing. Not enough Skaven, says someone in chat. Although Skaven do get a mention, and I thought that was interesting. Yet the rat-like Skaven get mentioned pretty early on page 46.
And Felix kind of just accepts it too. He's like, "Oh, well,
totally.
that's the thing."
Gotrek is just dropping lore all over the place. Gotrek's just like the time of, whoa, this is what it was like before the elves and the dwarves fought. There are Skaven. Like, by the way, the beastmen are a separate species. Yeah. Just all over the place. And just marvel at, he just constantly marvels at how little Felix knows.
Rightly so, I suppose.
Yeah, quite rightly. Yeah, it's not like laugh out loud funny, but it's got a like a pulpy, humorous touch to it.
Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah.
The humor of it comes through quite strongly in some places, but it's obviously a grim and perilous series of stories.
Yeah, like there's this one bit here where he says, Faragrim was a dwarf. A dwarf never forgets the sight of gold. You know the problem with your people, you have no respect for elder. But then he says, no wonder your people are in such dire straits then, Felix muttered. And then Felix says to him, nothing, just answer me this. Why didn't Faragrim return for the treasure himself? He's had 18 years. And Gotrek says, because he showed proper fiscal caution. And Felix is like, meanness. He showed meanness. So yeah, those exchanges are quite good. Yeah, Felix steals the show because he's us, the reader. We want to know more, just like Felix. Yeah, like Felix is the foil for the reader to get into the story.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, this is where they're talking about Felix is challenging Gotrek about, yeah, but was Faragrim really telling the truth? Did dwarves always tell the truth? And Gotrek is like, well, very rarely do they break oaths, but yeah. What else have I taken a note on? Just seeing if there's anything that we missed. I don't think so. We didn't mention the goblin clan, which are what were they? The Crimson Skull goblins. They encounter at the start.
A few different bands, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So I think what we need to talk about is what we're gonna do next. What are people?
Ooh.
What do we think might be possibles for the next book club?
The suspense.
The suspense.
I think there's a good few options. I know you mentioned that you thought that. What would you like to put forward then? What should go on the list here?
I don't know. I want to hear from the chat first before I say what I think.
Any suggestions? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's next up? What are we voting on?
Yeah. While we're doing that, there was another another pop-up was in the Justine story. Justine talks about Choigan, who may be related to Johannes Treugen from The Enemy Within. Could be a brother or a cousin. He's mentioned as a mad artist. So there's just like so many little characters dropped all the way through that pop up elsewhere. Yeah, there's Albrecht Kruger, who's a philosophy lecturer as well. There's also a really interesting section where Gotrek doesn't get killed by a spell because Felix says the magic was earth, like it goes through Gotrek and goes through the metal, and just like he's some kind of superconductor.
Some combination of electrical principles and perhaps dwarven magical resilience, but
dwarven magical resilience. Yeah, it's good. And what we haven't really talked at all about the last one. While people are popping in the chat, we haven't talked that much about the Children of Ulrich. How
that's true.
At the start of that, they talk about how back in the past, the wolf god of Middenheim has like mated with humans, and over time he's had like wolf human werewolves. Yeah, exactly. We didn't talk about the werewolves, Ricky.
Yep. Who have this sort of savage nobility to some of them, right? There's this they're not the worst thing in the books, I'll put it that way.
No, they're absolutely not the worst thing in the books. And Vermin in Ulrich's Children, like, kills one of the wolfmen on purpose, but so he can, is killed by him so his spirit can then possess him, and he can be, as Felix thinks, so he can be like immortal and live forever. But I thought that they were kind of underwhelming. Like, it was like he didn't really know whether they were bad guys or good guys. Like at the start, they're like, oh yeah, some of them have got tainted and like go off and eat human flesh now. But then at the end, it's just like the girl in it, she lets them in. And then at the end, Gotrek is just like, oh yeah, well, I've just had to, I thought I'd never get to the end of those damn tracks. Had to kill about 50 wolves to get into just like casual slaughter of these like intelligent wolf people,
as is his way. Yes.
And you spend the whole time thinking that the girl that Felix is with is gonna like let all of them in, and they're either gonna be like the great enemy or come to the rescue, and they're just kind of like slain off the page. It's weird. Off screen, they just all die.
Yep, Gotrek is just a force of nature who hews through all of these.
Yeah, apart from the one that is possessed by... It's just weird. I just found it a little bit of a anticlimax.
Yeah, a little bit. Although I do like Gotrek wandering into the story by killing every other character in the story. There's a certain charm to that.
Yeah. But yeah, the final line of the book, well, Manling, it looks like you've had a busy night. I hope you've left me something to kill. Yeah. So yeah, let's have a look. What have we got? Well, last time we had Lords of the Lance on it, and I still think that's an interesting one because it's set in the Old World time period, which we've talked a little bit about before. Some people have said Head Taker, some Skaven Slayer, then is that the next book? Yeah, when they get to Nuln.
Sounds right.
Yeah. I remember Gotrek not having a beard in the early books. Does Gotrek have a beard in TROLLSLAYER, or is it just not directly mentioned? Players were totally shaved dwarves other than the mohawk. Well, on the front cover, the TROLLSLAYER does indeed have a beard, a white one.
Perhaps we're meant to just assume that he's got a beard because he's a dwarf. But they reference his beard because they reference his beard as disgusting, right? His beard is the place that food gets caught, right?
Yeah.
That's his secret storage space for leftovers and such.
Yeah. So I think we're definitely there's another suggestion for Lords of the Lance. Lords of the Lance is definitely going to be one of the ones on our list. I think we'll hold that over from the last time. Gonna take a note.
I would enjoy that.
Yeah. But we're going to do a vote again, are we?
That sounds right.
Yeah. So Lords of the Lance is 1. What else do we think? Do Head Taker. I will give you $0. No, I won't. Malice Darkblade's novel, Black Hearts, or a possible 40k book. I think we've agreed that our next one is going to be 4 weeks, because that gives people time over Christmas as well. And we're not going to have a 40k one on the list, but potentially we will have. I would quite like to do, my one would be the first book in the Ambassador Chronicles.
Okay.
Oh no, wait, that's another Graham McNeil book. Maybe we don't want more than one by the same author. Oh, what do you think, Vera? What would you?
If I'm gonna put one forward myself, I would say Skarsnik.
Skarsnik. Okay.
Darkblade would be fun also, though.
Darkblade. Right, well, we'll have to have a think about it. I would quite like one. So Lords of the Lance is going to be quite human-centric, right? Should we go for a really old school one, like one of the Kim Newman books? Jack Yeovil. That's his pen name for we've got Genevieve Undead, we've got what else is there? Beasts in Velvet, it's a classic. Drakenfels.
That's a winner also.
Yeah, that's a winner. So far we've got Lords of the Lance, Skarsnik, and Drakenfels. It would be nice to get one that had a more elven perspective, potentially.
Guardians of the Forest could work.
Yeah.
That was thrown out, yeah.
Guardians of the Forest. Okay. So that means our 4 shortlist, which we will put up a poll for, are Lords of the Lance, Skarsnik, Drakenfels, and Guardians of the Forest. You heard it here first. With a big exclamation mark. What's Graham? Guardians of the Forest. Oh well, it's done now. It doesn't matter that we've got 2 by the same author. Oh. Yep. Mwahaha. Just as planned. So that's it. I think we've pretty much come to the end of book club. We've got our 4 for next month, which we will pop a poll up.
Yeah, we'll vote on this now. I had great fun with this. It was a good read. It was fun to go through again and take notes on stuff and ponder significance in the setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope everyone else enjoyed it too. There's loads more that I've actually got written down that we never got a chance to get to talk to. Some of the characters, some of the one character in the cat story, which became its own thing, was the Thunderer, a long-snouted demon cannon.
Yes,
I talk about that.
I quite enjoyed the way that the Chaos Warrior organizing this beast herd brought a new level of threat forward.
Yeah, totally. And also what I thought was interesting in that is that they think about the Imperial roads. So, and I think it's Justine thinks that the Imperial roads are a great way to destroy the Empire. Like, she's like, thanks for making these roads, because it makes it really easy for us to get our war bands about and destroy you. Yeah,
they carry the lifeblood, but also the disease.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was pretty grim.
And it's neat to see the roads as the focus there, because I think that in the more modern era of Warhammer Fantasy, we've sort of been establishing the rivers as the true lifeblood. So it's neat to see.
Yeah, it's interesting because also the roads are considered, it's like the forests are the dangerous place, and the forests and the rivers are like cutting through, and that's safety. But in this perspective, the chaos worshipper is thinking, no, they're really good. They're excellent for us to invade the empire with.
Well, to be fair, Gotrek and Felix are ambushed constantly on pretty much every path they walk.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that I didn't mention was most of the troops at Prague, Gotrek, when he's explaining the Beastmen background to Felix, he says most of the troops at Prague were Beastmen, and he mentions Magnus the Pious, and Felix makes a sign of the hammer and refers to Magnus the Pious as the Sainted One, which is good to, like, that's a concept, like a Sainted One that does come up on and off in Warhammer.
Mm.
So yeah, we'll pop the poll up and we'll see what we'll be doing next time. But until then, are you doing any more Lorebeards before Christmas, or is that you and me until
That might be you and me through Christmas. I'm going to be spending the next few weeks in a couple of different deadlines for various game lines and things. And then following the new year, I believe that Ross and I are spinning up the gears for the RPG Lorebearded section, which will be quite fun.
Excellent. And I will no doubt make some kind of cameo appearance with Andy now and then, as he and Ryan do their fantasy Lorebeards. So yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us for the first installation of Book Club. Join us on the Discord server if you've got any suggestions. We've got a Discord Book Club. We've got a Lorebeards Discord server, and it's got a Book Club channel in it, so you can pop any suggestions, thoughts, or comments in there, and we will be avidly reading them. And until the next time, like, happy reading. We'll get the poll up, and you'll have a month to procure that book and read it. See you next time.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.